Hello, this is Brian Funk, and thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. I'm very excited to announce that my new book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, is now available in paperback form, a real book that you can hold and touch and turn to any page you like in a second. And it's a pretty big book, 629 pages of activities, exercises, and wisdom I've learned over the years. It's available on Amazon.com. The 5-Minute Music Producer is 365 music-making activities that will help with your songwriting and music production. It'll help you fight writer's block, make more music, write better lyrics, develop solid workflows, learn techniques for generating ideas, and finish more music. It's like having your very own music production personal trainer giving you ideas and challenges each day. And the best part is the challenges are quick and easy, and they only take a few minutes. So even if you don't have a lot of time, you can spend 5 minutes and advance your music production skills. There's no better time to improve your music than now. Imagine where you'll be after a year of these activities. The 5-Minute Music Producer has hit the #1 new release in the music songwriting and music recording and sound categories on Amazon. So check out the 5-Minute Music Producer, 365 music-making activities. It's available on Amazon.com, or you can go to brianfunk.com/book. Hello and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have a very special guest. It's James Patrick. He is the co-founder of Slam Academy, a musician, producer. He's one of the very first Ableton Certified Trainers, and he's the author of the new book, Sound Design for Electronic Music, Creating Original Sounds with Ableton Live, Part 1, Essentials of Analog and FM Synthesis. And that's probably the thing that got us to get together now, but we've been bouncing in the same community for a while now. And James, it's great to finally get a chance to meet you in sort of person here, but in real life anyway. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Brian. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've been a fan from afar of all of your work, and I'm honored to be here. I'm doing great. I just got off of a 3-day long birthday party. I just turned 47 years old.
Happy
This is the
birthday.
age when you start writing down all the smart things you've learned so they can be left behind.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but yeah, I live on the Mississippi River, and right out in front of my house, there's a big island that's a nature preserve.
Hmm.
And we've always wanted to throw a big rager out there. And so we spent the first night, we had everyone camp on our property, probably about 60 people maybe. We did a barbecue, and then the very next morning, we brought 8 subwoofers and a bunch of DJ gear out to this sandy island on the river, and brought all of our friends out there one boatload at a time, and it was great. And we
Wow.
made it back just in time before dark and the thunderstorm, and then we proceeded to jam all night long. And so I'm feeling really enlightened by all the love of my community here, and also I've been really looking forward to this opportunity to be on this show with you.
Wow, what a party. That's awesome.
It was
The
great, for sure.
camping, live music, I
Hmm.
mean, all
All the
good
things,
stuff.
and a proper renegade too. So like everyone, there's something extra exciting when you know that you couldn't even get a permit for this if you wanted. There's something
Uh-huh.
just exciting about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really fun, and yeah, just feeling super blessed. So
Hmm.
yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you, and congratulations, happy birthday, congratulations on new child, and
Hmm.
congratulations on the book.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
a lot of cool stuff right there.
It is. I have actually 4 babies. I'm crazy, but my wife and I just love being parents so much that we have these 11-year-old twins named Darwin and Roland. And yes, Roland is named after the drum machine. But we waited about 8, 9 years. We didn't maybe think we were going to have more. And then my wife in particular really got the itch. And so we had another boy. And so then, of course, you have 3 boys. And so then we had a girl. So
Yeah.
our little 3-month-old, her name is Della Jude. And we are just elated about that. So
Hmm.
it's really, I mean, the book is really cool, but actually, I must say, even cooler is having a new little baby girl in my house in my life. So
Yeah,
thanks.
that's excellent. Very happy for you. Good to hear some good
Thanks. Thank
news.
you.
So, where do we start? There's so much. It's uh, it's been cool seeing your work over the years too. I've been following you and seeing the work that Slam Academy puts out is really great. When did you start the school, Slam Academy?
Thanks for asking. So it was about 11 or 12 years ago. I think it was probably like 12 or so that we had the idea. And so the quick backstory is that I was just a DJ for 20 years and I didn't really have a like PhD or master's degree in composition or audio or anything like that. I curated a festival for the University of Minnesota for 5 or 6 years, and it was called the Spark Festival, and it was really fun. It was pretty indie, but we had a lot of fun. We met a lot of people, booked a lot of great people, including like Morton Subotnick and Speedy J and Pole. I had a lot of people from Berlin and people who I always really looked up to. Um, and after that kind of dissipated, we ended up, the original director of the festival reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I really miss working with you. I think we should start a school together." And he has two master's degrees and a PhD,
Mhm.
and all in music stuff. And so I was like, maybe you could be my ticket to like fortifying myself in academia. Just being a
Right.
DJ and just throwing a lot of underground parties and just being a lover of sound. He had this really mature, evolved intellectual and academic side. And so we became this really good, really solid yin and yang together. He's also a certified trainer. His name is Dr. Jay Allen. He's a pretty much famous music theory for electronic musicians educator. His music and books and curriculum have been translated to all sorts of languages and shared all around the world. And he actually wrote our first book that Slam Academy put out. It's called Music Theory for Electronic Music Producers. And it's very
Mhm.
great. It's like how to arrange beautiful sounding music without knowing how to play the piano, basically. So that's kind of the backstory of Slam. So it was about 11 years ago. We kicked it off and we ended up having a really great time. We had a tiny little space downtown, downtown Minneapolis, and we kept it really indie for quite a while and still is indie. But we've changed our business model during COVID. We converted to a kind of subscription membership model. So now people who just want to dip their toe in can. There's like really no commitment. There's no student loans or any, financial aid junk like that, which we always hated.
Mhm.
Myself and Dr. J both taught, and he still teaches in traditional university settings. I dipped out when we started Slam, but I had about 10 years of teaching in those environments too before Slam. And yeah, we wanted to create a space that was safe and equitable and holistic in its music and audio education that was primarily focused on electronic music that wouldn't put people in debt. So the past 4 years of running the membership model has been really, really fun because we're meeting a lot of new people all the time. And we're able to, it's a small enough company to where we're able to really engage personally with every single member. So the thing that makes Slam Academy special is that we offer live instruction. It's not just videos.
Mhm.
So for a really affordable rate, not sound like a sales pitch, as cheap as $100 a month, you can be working directly with certified trainers on your music. And private lessons with certified trainers, for those of you who are listening, generally around about $100 an hour, give or take. So this is an entire month, and you get 3 hours a week of direct contact in our Discord server with certified trainers where they work on your music with you, as well as access to all these great courses that we've been developing for many years. So I taught my first sound design class in 2003 at a institute of Audio Institute, and I taught there for 11 years, and then used that knowledge to kind of build the sound design curriculum at Slam. Which, again, while we teach a lot of stuff, we have dubstep classes and techno classes and all that. The 6 month sound design program at Slam is pretty much unparalleled, I would say, as far as its depth. And that is all that stuff is the makings for the book. So the sound design book is not necessarily a textbook, but could easily be used as a textbook for such a course.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, that's the background on Slam Academy. We're an independent organization dedicated to helping our members realize their greatest potential in the sound arts. So, we have a DJ program that's very, very popular. It's awesome, but we that's a feeder program for our Ableton course, which then feeds all of our more advanced classes. It's generally the track people go on, or else they take the DJ program last. Because you finally have originals you want to play for people. So, but yeah, that's the background on Slam. It's Dr. J. Allen and I started the place. It's been really, really fun. Um, After years and years of teaching at formal institutions, there was always this dark cloud over my students' heads because I knew they had these big student loans they were accruing over time.
Hmm.
You go to a place like Full Sail or whatever, that's great, but it's not cheap. And so we really want to be able to reach especially underrepresented communities, people of color, people who don't look like me, and it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to do that when we're not, charging people like for a Mercedes Benz or whatever. So in the end, I want to know that I did something good for my community. And I also, of course, want to be able to maintain and sustain the business model. So we're trying to find that sweet spot in there.
Hmm.
But I guess the last thing I'll say about Slam is we make a massive impact on all of our members. I'm really proud of how all the time I hear, man, I didn't know a place like this existed. I'm so glad I'm able to have a dojo, have a practice center where I can be a part of a community of like minded, kind people who are open, and it's an ego free environment. And, on day one, you're either making beats or you're patching together oscillators and filters and, having breakthroughs all the time and helping people achieve their goals, which I think in many ways, people who want to have a creative outlet in their life, yeah, maybe you want to be the DJ on stage at the festival, but I'm more in it to help people have a greater sense of meaning in their life. Brian, I'm sure you understand that when, this world we live in today is a brutal grind if you don't
Hmm.
have something that you just love that you can escape to. For some people, it's baking pies, and for other people it's knitting, I don't know, grandmas or whatever. But weaving together sound waves is truly therapeutic when you enter the flow state through having a little bit of formal training or even just a little bit of mentorship or guidance. And so being able to open that door for people is really the essence of what we're trying to do at Slam.
That's awesome. I mean, community is so important,
Mm-hmm.
especially nowadays when you can do all this stuff by yourself and you find yourself in a bedroom or a basement or something, and it's
Right.
very, very isolated. And
So true.
music
Yeah.
is meant to be shared and played together, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Right.
important that people find those communities and others that they can interact with. And it's one of the reasons I started the podcast too, is just
Mm.
to talk to people because I mean, in my life, I do have supportive people, but how much can I talk about detuning oscillators and compressing a snare drum before I lose
Right.
them real fast?
Right. Totally. Yeah, you can see them like, "Zzz, okay, what
Like,
are we talking about
okay.
now?" Yeah. After many years of being a DJ, I mean, I think like when I was in my teens and early 20s and I was like learning how to DJ, it was okay to DJ alone. But that actually, the shelf life for that kind of thing actually is pretty low, at least for me, because I feel like as soon as you have one person in the room who's like, great track, man, or whatever, you're like, yeah, wait till you hear the next one. And if there's two or three people in the room who are like, great track, that just starts to compound on itself. And, so that clearly applies to performance, but even on a more just supportive community level outside of performance, like when you can know that there's people around you who are not going to judge you,
Hmm.
who are going to just be happy that you're their friend and that you're also making stuff. It it's just really elevating, you know. Yeah. So we live in Minneapolis here, and luckily Prince made it cool to stay here. Um, if you live in any other place other than LA or New York, and you're going to be like a creative powerhouse, there's this vision that you have to move to LA or New York. But we wanted to provide a community for people in the Twin Cities, and now ultimately on the internet. We have more online members than we do here, even now. We
Hmm.
want to, luckily Discord and other technologies like that have allowed for us to, let's all get together and do a raid or listen to each other's tracks or give each other feedback. And it just kind of, it's really empowering. So yeah, it's
It's
fun.
nice
It's
to
inspiring.
build communities like in smaller places like that compared to the traditional New York, LA type of things because you can be more involved in it. You can
Hmm.
it's a smaller pond really. You can be
Totally.
the bigger fish there.
It's hard to make waves in the, like, if you're a little fish swimming
Yeah,
around in the ocean.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well that's cool. That's a great story and it's really nice that you're also really got that in mind about the cost, with student loans get out of control so fast and
It's crazy.
it's a
Yeah.
great
Like
thing.
they never told me that I'd be paying $700 a month for 20 years or whatever,
Yeah.
and if they said it, I mean, if it was in the fine print, I sure wasn't interested in reading it. I just was like, give me the prize, at the end of all this. And I don't really
Yeah,
have
it's
necessarily regrets, but that's a heavy, you can't really like explain that to a 19-year-old what that really
no.
means. Say that to a 40-year-old and they're like, whoa, I
Yeah.
gotta think about this for a while.
Right. Yeah, because you're not told that side. You assume the job is on the other end of that
Yeah,
degree and
right.
it's going to pay for it in a couple months.
Yeah,
You'll be
right.
all good.
Hmm. Kidding.
So, what brought on the book? Because that's a big undertaking. I know myself. It's it's a kind of in some ways horrible thing to do to yourself to decide to write a book.
I could make a joke and say what really brought on the book is not realizing how much work it is to make a book. But
That's kind of
yeah,
how I feel
by the
too.
way, you also did a book, right? About
Yeah,
9 months ago or a year, maybe 50.
not even. Yeah, about
Please tell. I'm flipping the script.
six months or
Tell
so
me about
ago.
your book really quick.
Well, that's the 5 minute music producer.
That's what it
It's
is. Yep.
a daily activity
Cool.
for making music. So it came out of teaching,
Hmm.
trying to get ideas, exercises to get people started, get ideas flowing, and not just getting started, but developing and storing ideas, like creating a system. Because something that's really helped me a lot is having these lists of like song titles or things I can try in my songs. And for a long time, especially when I was learning computer based music and recording, I was learning, all kinds of stuff, mostly on YouTube and tutorials, but
Hmm.
I wasn't keeping track of it. So I went through this long period of just learning, learning, learning. And then when I wanted to actually do it, I had to relearn it anyway.
Hmm.
So it was kind of became apparent that I needed a, an activity, a reason to do it,
Sure.
to actually learn it. So it kind of started as a way to document all of these things for myself and help other people do that too.
Nice.
Just something every day for a couple minutes that'll either build a skill set, give you new ideas, help you finish songs, or just
Hmm.
collect ideas for the next time you're writing music. Because those came in really handy for me, especially in collaborative situations, playing in bands when we're jamming. We got this cool idea, and it's like, all right, someone has to sing something. What is it going to be about? And to go through the
Hmm.
list and be like, oh, that's a cool title. Let's try to make that
Nice.
song.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these it making music is a practice, and the idea of having something to keep coming back to every day, like your daily meditation.
Hmm.
I think that's a format, especially nowadays, that is going to be really easily digested and have a long shelf life. A lot of those concepts, I'm sure a majority of the book is going to be able to stay relevant, you know, because so many people are looking for that. Like so many of my students are like, I sit down and I like find myself doing the same thing over and over. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think that's why the 74 creative strategies that we just all know and love by Dennis DeSantis
Hmm.
was so kind of pivotal in that sense because it by the end of that, I mean, you're not short on techniques and ideas to change it
Yeah.
up. You know?
Yeah, that's a great book. I've used it as just reference. In the
all the
middle,
time.
how do I
Yep.
progress and just pop it
Yep.
open?
So there's three books, folks. If you're watching this, you got 5 Minute Music Producer by Brian Funk. You got 74 Creative Strategies by Dennis DeSantis, which is a pivotal book. And then you also have Sound Design for Electronic Music by James Patrick. So I guess let's talk about this thing for a quick sec. I just wanted to
Please.
say that, as you mentioned before, Brian, this is part one. Because when I originally, it was the pandemic, and we're all stuck at home. And you asked me how the book came about, and I've been teaching for over 20 years, and as a teacher, you always have these aha moments where you're like, I got to remember that moment. Like, that person I'm working with now gets it. Like,
Mm,
whatever just happened in that conversation and in that technique, they are now like, they just leveled up. You can just like watch them level up from some sort of discourse or some sort of metaphor, maybe. And so, yeah, I just, I've had this feeling like my brain feels so full, 20 years of full time teaching. I've been doing Ableton, I've been working with them since 2006. So that's just many, many years to be thinking about ways to explain things, and
mhm.
I just found myself really wanting to just, have a big brain dump. And so it was like, what better time? We're all stuck at home. So I've been thinking about it and writing down tables of contents over and over and kind of rehashing the ideas for several years before COVID. But when the lockdown happened, I was like, this is it. So I sat down and I wrote a book, and it turned into two books because when I started doing layout and everything, I realized it was like 500 plus pages. And I was like, I don't really want to release a book that's that big. So I broke it up into two different parts. So the first part is, like you said, essentials of analog and digital synthesis. So to talk music shop really quick, for those of you who don't realize, most of the music making technology that we use, at least until like AI started really coming around, was based on analog technologies. Some of these dating all the way back to like World War One. Like the oscillator, which is the main kind of signal source for most electronic sounds. Like before, up until now, for the most part, is not a music tool at all. It's like an electrician tool. And in fact, alternating current is already coming out of the wall. Anytime you plug in two prongs into the wall, there's a vibration at a certain frequency and amplitude. And somebody was just smart enough, the original, probably like Leon Theremin and other people like that, to say, hey, that could be a pitch, and start to, transduce that voltage into a audible signal. And that conversation keep going forever. But the book, if you look at the table of contents, the first few chapters are really about the nature of sound. Talks about physics and vibration and harmonics and ratios, and really starting to understand like the meaning of what we're hearing in our ears. You might perceive something as like a bass line or a set of chords or a drum beat, but really, what is that stuff that's coming into our ears? And kind of looking at it through a physics lens a little bit, as well as kind of just general math lens. There's a lot of metaphors in there to help people who are new to that stuff understand sound and what it really is. And then we quickly start moving into analog synthesis, which, if you grab a new Ableton Live pack and you download it and start looking at all the knobs, chances are a large majority of the words that are trying to help you understand what those knobs do are based on this, like, oftentimes 100-year-old technology. Well, that is changing all the time, more and more often. But especially, they're just the foundation of so much of the art of sound and the language that's used to help create it. Even if you look at these modulars and stuff behind me, all around there, you're going to see frequency, amplitude, timbre, tone, harmonics, these different words that all bring you back to understanding the source. So yeah, but once you get through the kind of essence of what sound is, we move through the elements of analog synthesis, which just about anyone can tell you who has experience. There are really like 6 primary elements of analog synthesis. There's 3 audio modules and 3 modulators. And if you start to understand that simple kind of puzzle piece with these 6 puzzles or 6 pieces and what they are, you can start to click them together and make shapes. The audio modules are oscillators, filters, and amplifiers, and the modulators are LFOs, envelopes, and the keyboard or the sequencer. And so those are all pretty simple tools. They're all based on voltage. And if you can start to see how they connect, you can start to make shapes, and so that's kind of the middle part of the book, just kind of helping say, okay, now that we understand vibration and harmonics and stuff like that, let's use the oscillator to generate a tone, the filter to sculpt those harmonics, the amplifier to turn it up, and then lastly, let's add some movement and modulation and make those variables dance. So we talk about, the main dimensions of sound and how those modules relate to the dimensions, like oscillators generate a frequency, filters sculpt the timbre, and amplifiers obviously control the amplitude or volume of the signal, and kind of really going super elemental and ground up for the middle part of the book. And then the whole last part of the book, and I think a lot of more like intermediate or advanced users are going to flip to the back more quickly. The last 5 chapters are really just dense with techniques, like looking at it from a musical lens or sound design for picture or any sort of experiential audio. By the end, you're making all your own drums and percussion sounds and sound effects and transition sounds for your electronic music, whether it's risers or build sounds or drop sounds, bass drops, all that stuff, all just using FM synthesis. So the last few chapters really harness the Ableton operator and really explore every single aspect of that instrument. I'm not sure if I missed a single element of the operator, but my mission wasn't to teach the operator. It was really to teach how to make great sounds with it. So that's where that book ends. And then with part 2, it picks up with sampling and effects processing. And I'm really excited about that because it's a cliffhanger, part 1, because you get to the end and you realize this is not the end yet.
Yeah.
Because anyone who's really good with the synthesizer realizes that you can only make it sound so good until you start adding effects. So I think especially nowadays, a huge part of the sound design puzzle is effects. If you watch great electronic music producers nowadays, oftentimes they just start with a square wave. It's like beep. And then, 100 effects devices later, they have this incredible mind-blowing sound. I think the art of sound becomes so much more expansive when you start incorporating effects. And of course, sampling and resampling. So that's part 2. So that's all. Back to the daunting task of writing a book. I had the manuscript written down, 500 pages, and I was like, I wrote a book, hooray. And a Word document with 500 pages on it is not a book. A book is something that looks beautiful and has like illustrations. You can't really see this, and screen grabs, and is nicely laid out with color-coded chapters and the font just right. And I'm not a graphic designer or an illustrator, so that actually was the part that took a lot longer for me, because it took a team of people to make it look and read as elegantly and be as beautiful as it is. So yeah, that's the part we're working on for part 2, and I believe it's going to go a lot quicker this time because it's a little more color by number, because we already learned the hard way. We invented the wheel with part 1. So that's a little bit about the background of why the book and also what the book. And anyone that's feeling compelled to learn more about that, you can pick it up on Amazon. The last thing I'll say about the book, and to risk sounding like a plug, is that when I finished the book and finished the layout and illustration and all looked beautiful, it was my partner, Dr. J, who said, what you should really do with this book? You should make a video course, and you should give everyone access to Slam Academy when they read the book. So on page 2 of the book, there's a QR code, and you get a video tutorial and a downloadable preset for every single exercise in the book. There's over 50. And then you also get access to the Slam Academy Discord and our online labs and everything. So that's the real hidden value in the book, is that you can tap into the Slam Academy community, and it's all included in with the price of the book. So
Wow.
we really wanted to go hard with this thing and hopefully attract some new people who always wanted to create original sounds but felt stuck using presets. So yeah, that's the real kind of hopefully icing on the cake for the book experience that will make it just for sure hit the target for every single person that picks it up.
Oh yeah, I think so because you're talking about sound, so it's nice to hear it. It's nice to
Right.
actually
Right.
see what's happening instead
Totally.
of using words all the time.
Like
Yeah,
Frank
that's
Zappa says, dancing about architecture. You guys know that
right.
one? Everyone,
Yeah, writing
talking
about
about music
music.
is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah,
It's beautiful. So yeah, thanks.
yeah, that's a good bonus there, and
Hmm.
it's such good stuff to get a grasp of
Hmm.
because it's so foundational to everything. Even if
Hmm.
you're not gonna get crazy with synthesis, just understanding how sound works, how you sculpt it, and even when you're EQing an analog instrument, an acoustic instrument, that stuff really helps a lot understanding how you're carving sounds with synthesis and
Totally.
mixing, putting
Yeah,
things
like
together.
learning like acoustics. I've embraced a really I love the way the acoustic space behaves, and I achieved that understanding through really understanding harmonics,
Hmm.
which came through understanding oscillators and synthesizers. I was a techno DJ and just wanted to like make my own original sounding techno in the 90s. And then fast forward years later, and I'm able, through that knowledge, to design studio spaces and all sorts of other audio related applications that have nothing to do with a synthesizer.
Hmm.
So it's so true.
Now, your process was outlining, writing chapters, you said? That was kind of the first step?
Yeah, I had written probably 3 or 4 different sequences as far as the table of contents. And I honestly based the original table of contents on the curriculum that I've written and taught for so many years. We start with really low level stuff and then build. And every single week, there's a new thing that we
Hmm.
build off of last week. And that's how the table of contents flows. Of course, it ended up being changed around a handful of times, and with my technical editors making great suggestions. But yeah, that's the table of contents was a rough skeleton, but then ultimately it was just a massive brain dump.
Hmm.
You know, I just have towards the end of, I'd say, well, before COVID. Again, this such a weird time when everything sees like pre-COVID and post. But leading
Sure
up to
does.
COVID in my life as a teacher, so much of my teaching was like watching people's faces light up. And you can still see that through a Zoom meeting or a Discord channel, but it's kind of not the same as when you're like in the same physical space. And I just felt myself being like, I just have to write all this down. Like one day I will be gone,
Hmm.
and I just needed to just lay it all out there and just felt like I needed to kind of like pass this knowledge on. And I've got a lot of gratitude to all my mentors and other people in my life who helped me have those aha moments. Also, my students, as a teacher, I'm sure, Brian, you know that you learn so much when you teach. Every time you have a new student who has different experiences and different backgrounds, you start seeing it through their eyes. And I think ultimately that is how I entered sort of mastery level with this material, is teaching it for so many
Hmm.
years. But yeah, I knew that there were these topics, probably like say 50 different topics that could all potentially encapsulate their own book. But I just wanted to try and just get those out. I have ideas for third and fourth books that will be more in depth on certain specific topics, but this is kind of just meant to be kind of the big kind of biblical overview of everything you need to know to at least get started or to refine, fill in any missing gaps if you're already playing or decent at it, but really want to enter that kind of
Hmm.
mastery level where you can start to really like see the sound and know it intimately. So yeah, I mean, the process was table of contents, big brain dump, and then the difficult challenge of kind of starting to plug it all in and remove and delete parts. There's a lot of deleting.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
most of writing, right?
Right.
Or editing, I guess. It's just
Hmm.
deleting.
Totally.
Yeah. I think it's great because learning that stuff for me, just as a musician, I started on guitar. So I didn't come at it from an electronic perspective. But learning that stuff was so educational and just, I mean, we're mixing sound, we're playing with sound, we're recording sound. To understand
Right.
sound a little bit is like having a superpower when you actually
Hmm.
start to put the music
Totally.
together.
It
It's
really
worthwhile
is.
for anybody, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
not planning on becoming a
Mm-hmm.
a synthesist, you know, you
Yeah.
can get
It's
pretty
funny,
far with
like
it.
so many rock and roll people are like approach electronic music and feel like it's so foreign, but all the math of music is based on vibrating strings.
Hmm.
Like when you play a chord or even a single note and you pluck it nice and hard and you hear all those overtones. I mean, that's the original saw wave. If you like zoom way in on a picked guitar string, it's a saw wave. You're pulling it back and then letting go and it's snapping and then coming
Mm.
back. And it doesn't just vibrate the one note you're playing, it plays the octave above it and then the perfect fifth above that. The harder you strike it or the more distortion you put on it, the more notes there are in that one single tone. And
Mm.
so, yeah, there's a lot of transcendental realizations behind the art of sound. And it's cool. So yeah, you play guitar and what other? You're still playing in bands? You were saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool,
3-piece rock band, guitar, bass, drums,
awesome,
real simple. Um,
nice.
you know, the rock band format is kind of, I see it almost like a template or like a preset now.
Hmm.
And when you do music in the computer, whether it's electronic or not, you have all these choices all the time. You got all these options. What kind of drum? What kind of kick drum? What kind of snare? What kind of hi hat?
Hmm.
Where it's just we're using the drums that are here.
Hmm. Right.
I have this guitar and this amp. Let's go.
Hmm.
That's kind of it.
Love that.
But it helps you get to work. It helps you get started. But
Hmm.
it's all how things work together. And I've noticed more and more, even just like the tuning of the drums, like certain drums almost they're not they don't work in certain songs and certain tunings.
Hmm.
The overtones and vibrations of the guitar or the snare can really interfere with stuff. But once you understand that stuff and why that's happening, you can correct those problems so much easier
Right.
instead of just getting stuck.
Right. I love what you said about seeing the band format as a template. So many people, like younger producers, sweat away over like choosing the right snare drum for
Mm,
every track or whatever. It's just like it's a meme. You know what I mean? It's a million memes,
yeah.
the finding the right snare or getting the mix right or whatever. But I always like to say, and this is for anyone who's listening out there trying to figure out how to write an album or whatever. It's like when you listen to a Pink Floyd or a Led Zeppelin or Prince or Jimi Hendrix record, oftentimes it's the same drum sound on every song. It's the same guitar sound.
Mm,
It's just how they're playing it. And yeah, with electronic music, so much of the story you're telling is the sound itself. But I think a great way to come up with an EP or even an LP is to build a template or like pick a sound, just like a rock band. Like John Bonham had his sound, the drummer for Led Zeppelin, and he didn't need to like go buy a new drum kit for every song. That would have ruined the band.
right.
Like when you listen to Led Zeppelin, you want that John Bonham drum sound,
Hmm.
and so I think it's totally okay when, especially within the kind of framework of a single release, to be like, hey, let's make this release feel cohesive. I'm going to use this certain poly synth for the chords, or I'm going to use this certain kind of vocal effect on my mic, and that's just going to be the sound of the record. And song to song, maybe we'll tell a different story. Maybe one will be in major, one will be in minor.
Hmm.
You can regurgitate that thing, and maybe in electronic music you don't necessarily want to do that for your whole career, but definitely in the context within the constraints of a single release or album, I mean, I think it's important that you do that. Sometimes, I see producers who just build one song at a time and then reinvent the wheel at every song have a really hard time making an album.
Yeah.
Because in the end they have all these like one-offs, and there's no common thread.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like that common thread a lot. I like an
me too.
album to sound like an album,
Right.
an experience. It kind of puts you through this one journey. You
Hmm.
know,
Many
it's
greats do that. Especially in the earlier days of technology, it was like they had no choice.
hmm.
But with great electronic music, people they think about like the kind of dawn of higher technology. I was thinking about Bjork, for instance. Like she's moved through so many different sounds, but any one album, she usually picks one producer and they have this certain kind of energy, and then they just probably hole up for 6 months or however a year or whatever, and just drill down into that sound. So the
Mm,
whole album feels like it's came from the same like part of the universe.
hmm.
And I think that's a not only inspiring sentiment, but also kind of liberating. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with every track.
Yeah.
You have a nice ensemble sound. Like, just when you make the next track, don't hit Command N. Just do a save as and delete all your clips.
I do that.
And
Yeah.
now your band is ready to go. The band is in the garage. They've got their tone, and now just like change the tempo, change the key. You've got a new song, and that's how you make an album. I think at least that's one approach.
Yep. I know myself, I avoid that work of writing and putting songs together by searching for sounds and hoping they're going to bring me the kind of excitement to
Hmm.
actually make the song.
Hmm.
It's it's a, avoidance mechanism a lot of times.
Right. It can be really a buzzkill. I don't know this is a rhetorical question, but like how many students have you had who can't seem to get the ball through the goalposts, metaphorically, because as far as finishing a track, because they don't like what they're making. You're like, oh, but it just doesn't sound cool yet. And they're like,
Yeah.
they've got 3 clips and a loop, and it just doesn't sound cool to them because it doesn't sound like, Skrillex or Noisia or whoever their favorite artist is. And I think you just gotta get the ball through the goalpost, and like that's how you find that sound that you're looking for. There's no such thing as the perfect kick or the perfect snare or the perfect bass sound. I think for most great producers, they probably make hundreds of sketches before they're able to really achieve the sound that they're looking for, and the only way that they achieved it was by making those sketches.
Yeah.
you know and yeah, not to be too tangential, but that's just another. I'm kind of thinking about people who are listening to this podcast, assuming that sure there are some experts out there, but there are probably a lot of intermediate and even beginner level people listening to this podcast, and I hope some of these kind of mantras are helpful for you in your path if you're listening to this and feeling like, I mean, we all the great, I mean, great artists. It can be a tortured life at times, if not to sound too dark, but nobody can see all of music or any single art form all at once. Like, look at the great painters. So many great painters were we're really suffering. Think about like Vincent van Gogh. I mean, I don't know how exactly factual this is, but I don't believe he was very successful until it was posthumous. He lived a pretty terrible life. He hated his own work. He hated a lot of things and felt very unaccomplished
Mm.
because he was just, there's this moving target of completion of your work. And I think that demystifying that is, if anyone's ever says that that's simple, they don't fully understand it,
Right.
but this is where, again, like having a community and having mentors around can be really, really meaningful. I still,
Hmm.
to this day, after 25 years of being full time in this field, look to my mentors when I need inspiration, whether it's through a book or through just an email or a phone call or just getting feedback on a work in progress. And I think yeah, so I hope that some of these insights that, I know Brian has shared millions at this point through this podcast, but I hope I'm able to contribute positively to this library of knowledge and help empower people to see things a little differently and take the load off their shoulders and not feel so much pressure to find the perfect sound, or have this one track you're working on now be so precious that it's going to like make you something or help you realize some higher level of existence. It's really like the process and finding peace in the process that can, again, like, to bring it back to helping people live a more meaningful life. You don't want to be one of those tortured artists. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You don't want to be that person. You want to realize the like joy that is available to you every day by oftentimes like taking your ego out of the mix. I think that's part of the successful formula, and just realizing that this song I'm making is not perfect, but neither am I. And it's ultimately the process of touching sound and sculpting it, whether it's playing chords or, tweaking the filter or whatever you're doing, that really you got to find joy in the process. And then, your days spent on this earth will be hopefully more meaningful. You know, Whenever I have new students who are like, I'm going to be that person on stage, and until I do, I'm just never going to feel accomplished. That's tough. That's really tough when you meet people who are like, I just love sound so much. I just want to push the limits of sound and touch it every day. Occasionally new people come along with that perspective. And those are the people who I think they're 10,000 hours towards mastery. That clock starts spinning. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when you're constantly feeling like you have not yet achieved a goal,
Mm-hmm.
um, it can be brutal, at times. So hoping
Yeah,
to help people break through on that.
that goalpost often moves too as you
Totally.
get better and better. Oh, but now I want that. Now I want that.
Right.
And
Always. I think
it's always
always
on the
moves. I don't know.
horizon. Yeah.
Show me. I'd love to meet a goalpost that doesn't move. I'd be loving that. But I've never seen one.
Yeah, but I think that's beautiful advice that just the practice is the goal, the showing up, the playing with it, the trying things out,
Mm-hmm.
and the understanding like you're not always gonna be at your best. Just like you're not in any arena of your life. You're not always at your best creating your finest work, but stuff that you're consistent with, your average does progress.
Mm-hmm.
Your overall scoring percentage goes up, even though you might
Right.
have a couple weeks where you get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You in the big picture um, move forward,
Right.
and it's not precious, like you said. I love saying that nothing's precious. It's a real good mantra for collaborating so that you don't get into these like fights over how things should go.
Totally.
But it's also good for your own music. If you make it too precious, you just agonize over everything.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Part of the magic. Here's a mantra. This is like mantra trade-offs. Um, Part of the magic in finding happiness in making music, like traditional music and songs, I think, is developing a workflow that allows you to move quickly through the process.
Mm.
Because the greatest song in the world, heard on repeat for 3 weeks or 6 months, is you're going to be hating that no matter
Right.
what. Like I always joke about, remember Daft Punk Random Access Memories? We're
Mm-hmm.
up all night to get lucky. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone loved that song when they first heard it, And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it was on like every single radio station and every single DJ and every single remix. And it wasn't too long before I was like, I'm ready to set that one aside for a little while. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
brilliant piece of music. But I mean, any even like classical greats or anything, you listen to them over and over, like Miles Davis Kind of Blue. Like, I mean, I've listened to that so many times, there's just, so if developing that workflow that'll help you move quickly, because back to my like essence of this, to find happiness is being able to still enjoy the music you release.
Mm.
So many people like spend so much time on the mix down. Maybe you wrote the song in 1 or 2 nights, but once you get to that mix down, baby, you spend 3 weeks on that thing. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not good at mixing down, pay someone to do it because it's worth it, not because it's too hard for you to learn, but because you want to be excited about the song when it gets released. And if you're like learning how to mix, I mean, learning how to use an EQ can take hundreds of hours, like to really master the EQ and to where you can just like hear a frequency and be like, oh, 3.5K, cut it. All right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of practice. And if you're learning that as you're going, creating your own art, it's going to be really hard to love your art by the time it's released. As a DJ, have the advantage of playing gigs all the time, or not all the time, but say every couple of weekends. And so this is, I think, a great inspiration for being a DJ or for having a method, a platform where you can share your music. And maybe is part of the reason why DJing and electronic music production are so intertwined is that if I know I have a gig next weekend, I'll sit down and make a couple of originals, and I don't worry about them being perfect because I'm going to be mixing them with like hundreds of other songs.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I can crank it out. And then if I don't spend too long on it and just, follow all the workflows I've learned in so many years, I can write the song basically in one night, produce it in another night or two, mix it in one session. And I'm still loving that track by the time I'm playing it for people. So then when I'm like original and then I bring it in and people are like, oh my God, this is great. I can also be like, yes, this is great. I'm so excited about this song. And then people watching you play it, or they're like, this DJ, this producer loves this track. I can feel that. I love it too, I think, you know? So that's a whole lot of meta talk, but it's really like on a practical level, like refining your workflow isn't just about like cranking out a bunch of music. It's about figuring out how to not get stuck in any aspect of the process so you can still love it by the time it's done and you can be excited to share it. You know, whether it's in a DJ set or on your Bandcamp page or Spotify or whatever, like still liking your music is, if you're, you know, nowadays it takes you have to wear all the hats. You know, you got to be the songwriter, the producer, the engineer. So you're hearing that song oftentimes way too many times to really enjoy it. You know, it becomes, no matter how good it is. So develop those workflows, people. You know, if you're out there listening, like find workflows that allow you to move quickly and stay attracted to the process. Like as soon as that natural attraction to the process starts dying off, like that's your muse. You know, change it up. You know, grab the 5 Minute Music Producer by Brian and like just blindly open it up to a new page and do whatever that says. You know, or call up a friend who doesn't know anything about music and have them listen to your work in progress and like watch their face. You know, it can be painful, but it also can give you new ideas. You know, to change it up, keep moving quickly.
Yeah, well, I've abandoned a lot of music that I just really just worked on too long, where
Mm-hmm.
I've come back to it sometimes years later and I'm like, well, why did I stop working on this?
Right.
And I realize, oh, because look, it was created, you know, in January of this year, and the last time I opened it was February 2 years later because I've been working on it that whole
Mm-hmm.
time. So
Yeah.
just got burnt out on it.
Absolutely. I'd say most of my works, you know, call them Ableton sessions or whatever, recording sessions, especially from my first 10 years of making music, were rungs in a ladder. And I needed those rungs to get up to the higher floors of the building, you know, but those lower rungs oftentimes just exist for the experience. And so, man, you want your 10,000 hours to move quickly, like just embrace that.
Mm.
Like another mantra that I love to share with beginner students is like the next for the next 30 days, I want you just to like start something new every day or even every couple days and just realize that it's a throwaway project. You know, this is not about like, because as soon as you hear that cool bass line, you know, younger producers have this idea like, I can't wait to have this on Spotify or whatever. And you have so much still to learn about efficiently and effectively making like something that really lots of people are going to want to hear. That if you can just embrace the fact that this music it's just back to that, doing something for the process. If you know you're never going to release it, just like kick the ball, kick the ball. You got to kick a lot of balls before you're like on the football team as the field goal kicker. So, yep. So yeah, I think that's another really great little bit of sage advice is whether it's 30 days or whether it's the next 10 beats you make, you know, and this is not going to be as important for more intermediate or more experienced producers because maybe you're figuring out what the right moves are in this kind of chess game to get something really beautiful off the ground with your first pass. But, you know, to eliminate that getting stale on the shelf feeling where you no longer love the music, no matter how great it is, just make a bunch of stuff that you're never going to share. You know, I think they say, I don't know, like I baked sourdough bread and I had to throw away a lot of loaves before I was like giving them to my grandma for Christmas, you know, because it's, you know, you just got to, luckily flour is cheap, you know, tape is cheap. Get in there and hit record.
Yeah.
You know, just start recording stuff and making stuff. And not everything, I mean, most of your early works are just going to be sitting on a hard drive someday. And, you know, occasionally someone comes along where that's not the case. But for most of us, I think there are a lot of rungs on the ladder. And that's okay. It's beautiful.
I think most of the good music that I've made was when I didn't have that pressure so much. When it was
Hmm.
just, I'm just gonna do this, and
Hmm.
you know, if it comes out great, it comes out great. If not, it's just I'm practicing. I'm
Yeah,
going through
luckily
it.
you're in love with the process.
Yeah, just enjoy it enough
Sick.
and have fun with it.
Right. I just want to
Mm,
say, luckily you're in love with the process.
mm.
Now, tea for time's quick. I got to shut my studio door. Just like
Sure.
1 second. This other crew is showing up.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah,
I
I'm gonna take.
kind of want to pull a string on you because
Cool.
we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record, but just the kind of higher power stuff with music and the world of vibrations and energy and just how that all works. It's funny that we have a term like vibration, or vibe, mood,
Hmm.
feeling, and so much of music is it's just pressure and air and vibrations. It's in a way, I've heard it called a sense of touch, a highly sensitive sense of touch, where it's just the air moving those little hairs in your ear and it gets
Mm-hmm.
translated. Um, and I know you go into this a little bit in the book too, but I find this fascinating. This is part of where I think it helps me be a little less precious about all this stuff and oh man, I gotta make this the best track I ever made because it's my latest track and because it is this sort of like thing that's larger than us.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to pull that string on you and
Cool.
hear what you have to say about that a bit.
For sure. So yeah, I do talk about this in the book, but it's funny that the word vibe is like just so it's another like meme, and there's a reason why these things become so kind of altruistic or whatever is because um, when we've all had this experience where you meet someone and you can just feel without even necessarily words like wow, I feel just really like attracted to that person's vibe, or even the opposite where you just know
Mm,
that maybe there's a rub going on there that doesn't really work for your vibe. It's like we're on the same frequency.
mm,
This is another common statement in this field, and it's like the word frequency and the word vibe. I mean, they're inherent to all the energy that flows in the universe. You know, light waves and sound waves, light rays. They're all on a spectrum. You know, and you know, we all sound is a universal language, and so is light. And we think of the English language or the German language or whatever, and those are very very crude attempts to communicate compared to the energy that flows in between us all the time. And in pursuing the art of sound, especially with working with synthesis, I've came to terms with the fact that I've came to terms with these realizations, in particular with studying music, which is, there's 12 notes in an octave. That is also a fairly crude approximation of what is possible with energy.
mm,
Classical musicians pushed those 12 notes as just hard as they could and made a lot of amazing work. But that's just a very small fraction of the possible emotional quality that sound can have. And this is, I think, part of the reason why people really are gravitated towards synthesis, especially analog synthesis, like early on, especially if you go back to the 50s and 60s, the early revelations that synthesizer developers and pioneers had is there are no steps on an analog oscillator. It doesn't interpolate to different semitones. And there's more than 100 notes or cents in between every two notes on a piano, just like there's more feelings than happy or sad.
mm.
And I think when you're working with diatonic music, like notes on staff paper, you're really restricted to just a certain amount of emotional qualities. It's kind of like the basic color wheel. But if you want to get into, maybe you're feeling a certain sense of darkness that's hard to describe with words, or a certain sense of joy, you may need to reach beyond those 12 notes. And of course, you're going to build off of the fundamental principles of harmony. But when you create a stack of pitches and then start detuning them subtle amounts, you're able to explore the space in between the notes on the piano. And I think that is in many ways part of the like fuel that powers the vehicle of electronic music. Like when you listen to, take for example in, EDM music like Excision. I'm sure most people are familiar with Excision. That sound that happens at the drop, that you can't write that down on staff paper because as a sound designer, Excision or other artists, who are pushing you outside of the normal traditional music realm, like big time, they're detuning things and using effects in a way that's creating harmonics that are impossible to score. It requires technology in the long run to be able to bend and create rubs that go beyond the traditional red, yellow, and blue of the color wheel, and that spectrum of vibration that is sound or that is light is dense. There are thousands and thousands of variations, even just with one single pitch or two pitches as they relate. And it's kind of amazing, a lot of people don't realize this, but the emotional quality of music and a musical experience is oftentimes determined by the relationship between multiple pitches, especially when they happen at the same time. It's like if you close yourself in the room with someone who you really don't like, it can feel really difficult. And if you lock yourself in the room with someone you're in love with, it can be the most magical experience of your life. And that is, on a sound level, what happens when you stack multiple pitches on top of each other. And that rub, the space in between, like pure chaos and pure simple harmony, is really so much of the sound artist's palette and what we're working with electronic music nowadays. If you just stick to major and minor and everything is perfectly tempered, no matter how hard you push your electronic music, it will still in some way sound like classical music. But when you allow yourself to explore the rub, the more dissonant relationships, just by maybe detuning that oscillator a little bit, or adding maybe a little too much unison detune on the synth, or, using a delay or a flanger in a way that's kind of adding weird dissonant harmonics, or of course a distortion pedal on your guitar, that's where we're able to take people into new places and help them feel like they relate to this music on a level that's maybe more intimate to their actual human experience than major or minor really could, or diatonic music even could. And so I don't want to sound like I'm saying don't learn the basic rules of harmony if you're pursuing this, but you want to learn them so you can break them, like any proper system. And that is hard to avoid when you're working with analog synthesis or when you're working in an environment where you're free to break rules. You think back to the origins of jazz and blues music. Like the blue note is the flatted fifth, and that's where for those who don't understand that's like a tritone. And every blues song ever, pretty much, and I'm speaking approximately, but utilizes that like blue flatted note to evoke a feeling of, the kind of deeper, darker sadness that the inventors of blues music felt. Mozart and Beethoven hadn't yet experienced being in a brutalized and enslaved community of people and watching what the inventors of most of the great techniques used in the electronic music studio now have been through. Like people in Jamaica who invented so much of the way to turn the studio into a musical instrument, which is like the foundations of dubstep and drum and bass and even techno. And the people who invented, blues and jazz, playing in multiple keys and moving between keys. And, like Miles Davis said, he didn't like playing with formally trained musicians. It was boring. He wanted to play with people that were even accidentally breaking rules, because now we're able to start to get into chartreuse and magenta and different kinds of, color gradients that are going to be a little more in touch actually with the complexity of the human experience. So, higher power, you said? I don't know. I don't really consider myself a religious person, but I definitely believe in Mother Nature as the reason why we're able to all be here. The energy that flows through us at its source really does come from our sun. And so maybe I'm some sun worshiping pagan, but that I feel like, when I take that knowledge to the feeling I have when I'm with someone I love, or maybe even don't love, or the way I feel when I get the right stack of harmonics and it creates this feeling that is just really exciting. I feel like that is a way to touch a higher power, an energy that is around us all the time. So, the last thing I'll say about that is I know most people, hopefully everyone listening to this, like not only loves music, of course, but has had the experience of being at a festival or a concert in the kind of sonic sweet spot, which could be a pretty big space depending on what kind of technology you're dealing with the sound system. But sound system culture, for instance, especially like bass music and also house and techno, is so much driven by the bass and the low end, because those vibrations, like a low E, 40 hertz approximately, that's your ears don't even hear that note, because that vibration is too low, and it just passes through your physiology. And when you hear that bass drop, not to sound cheesy, and you look around, you don't have to say anything to the people you're standing with, because they can't avoid feeling that you're feeling. I can't make everyone read my book, but when everyone is standing in front of a really well tuned sound system and the right low note happens, everyone just read your book. You know what I mean? If you're able to be the person who made the track or is even performing the tune. And that is, I think, ultimately on a really, really meta level, why so many people keep coming back to music in their life as a source of joy. Especially like people who are maybe on the spectrum, dare I say, or like people who have a hard time communicating with words. It's like, oh my God, I'm able to communicate now. Some of my favorite students in my whole life are people who are maybe a little shy, or who have struggled with, writing a book or diplomacy even. But when you can touch sound and start to communicate through it and have these kinds of awarenesses that, hey, English language goes like this far into the pool of communication. But when you figure out how to work sub bass and then stack chords on top of it and then detune those chords, I mean, we are now touching God in a way, because we're working with a language that you can't get away from. It pulses through our body. It's already inside of us. So many people are like, oh, the drum beat, like, oh, that's like the heartbeat. I mean, it's not like, I mean, it's less like and it more is, it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah, very well put too.
Thank you.
And I can remember one of those early experiences as a child, hearing music. I was in a bad mood, angry about something, and heard a song, and then I wasn't mad anymore. I was different,
Mm.
and it blew my mind. At
Mm.
that age, I was like, "Wow, look at that! Music makes me feel happy." That
Mm.
was my simple understanding. But I really noticed the change, and it's really powerful like that. And you're right. It's like the idea that there's between any 2 points, there's an infinite number of points. Just you
Right.
can divide it forever,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much you can do. When I first started playing with computer-based music, where everything's perfectly in tune and perfectly in
Mm-hmm.
time, I was really surprised that that didn't sound so good to me.
Right.
Because growing up, I wish I could play the drums in time. I wish I could sing in pitch. I wish I could play the right notes all the time. And then when you finally could, it was like, well, wait a minute.
Right.
Something's gone now.
Totally. Yeah, that is so true. Like the first time you ever slapped a swing feel or a groove pool, even just this little tiny bit on a drum beat,
Mm-hmm.
or like, you listen to a James Brown or a Prince song, you don't realize that that tempo is subtly changing the whole song. And
Yeah.
if those people, James Brown or Prince, for example, were to have just made their beats on the grid, their music would not be great, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And we spend all this time like pursuing perfection, and you got to realize, I mean, that's a home run of a mantra right there. Is the magic is in the drift and in the slop a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I first started playing drums, my drum instructor was like, "Sounds good. Try playing it without a swing." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I didn't really realize I was just holding the sticks and hitting them the way it felt natural. And then I spent like a couple of years trying to play it straight, and I'm able to now. But when I go back to just playing loose, there's something all of a sudden that just opens up in a way,
Mm.
and it starts feeling more just like therapeutic and meditative, for me personally as the drummer. But I think, yeah, that's those subtle bits of slop are really, whether it's in harmony or whether it's in rhythm or whether it's in, even can be in a lot of aspects. I think that's really where things get interesting. You know, like a great example, and this is one of the things I wanted to say when we talked earlier before hitting record, is that some of you may or may, a lot of you may realize this already, but like so much of the math of music is in ratios. Like you probably know that an octave, when you play like C3 and then C4, those frequencies are a 2-to-1 ratio. And when you play C3 or C4 to C5, it's also a 2-to-1. No matter where you are on the piano, when you play two notes that are an octave apart, the two frequencies are a 2-to-1 ratio. That allows their phase to line up perfectly. And then it creates a consonant sound. And then when you start incorporating other notes, you start incorporating other ratios. So if you go downward through the most consonant intervals of the diatonic music system, octave is 2-to-1, perfect fifth, which is the next most consonant interval, is 3-to-2. The next most consonant interval is a perfect fourth, which is 4-to-3. The next one is a major third, which is 5-to-4. Next one is a minor third, which is 6-to-5, and so on. And the interesting thing about that I wanted to share as we're talking about drift and slop and humanity and swing feel is that it's actually all the same thing. When you play straight 16th notes on a drum kit, and everything is on the 16th notes, and it's perfect. It's kind of like playing all octaves, like everything lines up perfectly. But then when you throw in a triplet, da do do da do do da do do da do do, the John Bonham drum fill, just bring him back,
Mm.
or any sort of 3/4 relationship. That's the 3/4 ratio, which is the perfect fifth. Try this sometimes, people, as a fun experiment. Is make a beat with a triplet over a quarter, over a 16th note, or even an eighth note, just 3/4 relationship, and record it, and then pitch it up like 6 or 8 or 10 octaves. Can be hard, depending on what kind of technology you're working with, but you will start hearing a perfect fifth. And you can do it inversely too. If you have two oscillators that are playing a perfect fifth, say you're playing a C and a G, and you slow it way down, but keep their relative relationship the same, you will start hearing a triplet drum beat over a 16th note. And I think that's beautiful kind of transcendental math to look at. But again, like, you know, the perfect fifth is an essential harmony in all music, and the triplet or 3/4 is essential as well in creating a drum beat that's going to be a little more spicy.
Mm.
Find ways to kind of add more to get off the like really super linear grid. And same with swing feel. If you put a little swing feel on that drum beat, and then speed it way up, it's going to sound like a little dissonance or maybe a little more interesting overtones. It
Mm.
won't be like a nursery rhyme or like really basic sounding. It'll have more intrigue and more immersive or more introspective qualities. It'll be more evocative of complexity. And, we all know that the human experience is plenty complex. So, I mean, you want to communicate to your listeners, you want to find subtle ways to evoke that kind of more relatable complexity. that isn't maybe just like pure chaos, but somewhere the playground is between like pure dissonance and pure consonance, and maybe some of these like meta math and kind of principles will help us have a little more knowledge next time we're exploring sound and ways to evoke interesting results.
It's a beautiful magic.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we can send people to Amazon, right? That's the main place to get the book.
Yep. The book again, Sound Design for Electronic Music. This is part one. I'd love to see you guys check it out. I got some good support from the Ableton community. I've been a certified trainer for a long time, and I'm happy to share a lot of the knowledge that I've gained through many years of teaching. The book again is full of workflows. Every single chapter ends with workflows. So it's not only just this like meta higher power talk at all. Every lesson ends with a workflow. And the workflows are accompanied by videos and downloadable presets. So it's very, very practical as well as very theoretical. And I try to like tie in both sides of your brain for your listening or reading, pardon me, experience. And yeah, definitely. All you have to do is search Ableton Sound Design on Amazon. It'll be the top find. So it's published by my music school called Slam Academy. We've been around for 11 years. We have memberships that are available for very affordable rates, and they're available online or in person. But our private Discord community, as well as all of our weekly online labs and very in-depth sound design, mixing and mastering, as well as genre courses like bass music and house and techno and everything are all available all the time. So just go ahead and become a member and jump into the Slam Academy pool. I'd love to work with you. I will be one of your instructors. So if you want to work with me or any of my biggest heroes in music, link up with us, pick up that book, or of course, anyone can email me anytime, jp@slamacademy.com.
Awesome. And I'll put all that in the show notes too, so people
Cool.
can click right on through.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks so
Great.
much, James.
Yeah,
This is
Brian,
great.
thanks a lot for being with me. And thanks for going on this kind of deep dive. And I really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions for me or want me to iterate or cut anything out, just let me know. I'm happy to support.
Excellent. Great. Thank
Cool.
you. Thank you to everyone that listened.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
Hey, if you enjoyed the Music Production Podcast, please consider giving it a review on your favorite podcast provider and share it with a friend, somebody that you think might enjoy the show and get something out of it. That would mean a lot to me. And if you want to check out more of my work, including sound packs, tutorials, etc., head over to brianfunk.com. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.